Greetings, everyone, and welcome to part two of What Would Whitlam Do? And we have to say it is time to answer a question regarding what Albo should do and regarding what would happen if we went to a double dissolution election. Paulus, can you please repeat the question you had at the end of the last episode?
Absolutely. A little bit complex, but the shortest form of the question is, isn't this truly a massive gamble, given the possibility of Labour casting aspersions on the Greens as those chuckle fucks who are holding up our promise to deliver affordable housing, the very low likelihood of the Greens being able to say, no, we're fighting for you, and the honest probability of the Liberal National Coalition somehow being able to claw a, look, we're bastards, but at least we didn't do whatever the hell this is. Like, who wins here? Because I'm not seeing that it's the Greens, I'm not sure it's Labour, and I'm really not sure that it's the Australian people.
So, in order to answer this question, I first have to take a slight detour.
Okay.
So, long-time watchers of the show, of which there are not many of you, but we absolutely love those of you that are
There's
there.
like 4 of you. We'll hug you all one day.
Yeah, we'll have like a barbecue. We'll do it in like, I don't know, Parramatta. It'll be great. But anyway, so long-time viewers would know that I am in the process of making a documentary, for which I'm almost finished the first part. I've gotten, moving was hell, lots of delays, but I've almost finished the crowdfunding campaign for it, as I'm going to need to crowdfund for the animations and the artwork that will be featured. Essentially, the visuals need to be paid for, and I'm no artist. So, with regard to that, I have to talk about the gamble in media terms, because to say that this is a huge gamble for the Greens is actually not quite true. It is a much smaller gamble for the Greens than most may think at first. Because,
well, I mean, they're basically always being hammered by mainstream media anyway for one shortcoming or another. So if we look at it from the point of view of the media machine, this is going to be situation normal. They're going to be taking a beating anyway. It's not going to change much.
Well, not really. Because here's the thing. This is a big oversimplification, but Sky News really likes the Liberal Party. The Nine Entertainment, which is Nine, Fairfax, Sydney Morning Herald, and I think The Age as well, and some other news outlets, they basically dislike Labour, but kind of like the Greens and kind of like the Liberals.
Yeah, I've seen a lot more pro-Liberals in The Age than pro-Greens, but I'd agree with that assessment.
Yeah, they're basically teals. They like the Greens. They kind of like the Greens. They kind of like the Liberals, but they appear less biased.
So it's just a slightly more friendly neoconservative bias.
Yeah. So Murdoch media loves the Libs and the Nats. The Nine Entertainment kind of likes the Greens, kind of likes the Liberals, but also hates Labour. And the ABC finds a way to shit on Labour that appears legitimate while absolutely, for lack of a better term, sucking the Greens' dick. So, business as usual, or the media coverage that will result from all of this, will probably paint the Greens in either a fairly neutral or a good light. And instead of attacking Greens, I suspect that Murdoch media will instead be attacking Labour for failing to negotiate with the Greens or failing to negotiate with the Greens.
And so what about the absolute nut jobs that get media coverage? What about your hard right commentators, I guess you'd call them? Yes, I know you detest it.
Right.
What about your Clive Palmers, your Pauline Hansons, your Andrew Bolts?
They'll do about as well as they did last election. they'll do about as well as they did last election, but they're not, in terms of this discussion, they're not that important. If we do go to a double dissolution elections, it will very much be about, well, those three parties. The Greens aren't exactly a major party, but it'll be about them and the two major parties of Liberal and Labour, and, well, I guess the Nationals. But the Nationals, as I've said many times before, are just the Liberals, but with fancy hats. Very good fancy hats, mind you, but still.
Yeah, I was thinking earlier, why has nobody given Rupert Murdoch like a really, really nice hat? Why has nobody invited Rupert Murdoch to the great city of Tamworth? The great and proud city of Tamworth.
Dude,
for a country music festival, and give him a really big hat.
Look, he wouldn't be caught dead out there. The guy lives in New York. He's an American citizen. He's been an American citizen for ages. So why the fuck
does he think that he has the right to shape policy in the way that he attempts to?
It's not about right, it's about power, and he wants the power. But that's a whole other story. So, in terms of, to get back to the question, which is, isn't this a gamble for the Greens?
Yes.
It's not that big a gamble, because they're either going to be receiving fairly neutral coverage for the most part, or good coverage from outlets like the ABC. And the ABC, Nine, Fairfax, and Murdoch, which I just discussed, they own 80% of all the media outlets in Australia. Like 80% of media coverage is just those three. 10 and Channel 7, they own the rest. Channel 7 can be fairly neutral for the most part. Like Koshi, Koshi's no longer on the air. I heard recently that he retired, but he was sort of the only person there who was really pro-Labor. He was, for some reason, allowed to have opinions. But the rest of 7 seems fairly neutral. But again, I don't watch Channel 7 ever. So
what about the new media?
Years.
So what about
Friendly Jordies?
Media outlet? No. Jordan Shanks is going to be too busy popping a boner all day, every day for this. I think we can let him have his time of rest. Just for a few days, he can do his tour of Australia and tell jokes at RSL clubs around the country, and I don't know, go into his hotels with his classy bathrobe and saying to whatever pretty young thing has picked up his fancy, hey, this is the bathrobe. Right? This is the bathrobe that I wore in John Barilaro's Airbnb. He can have a rest. I'm thinking about things like The Conversation, Crikey, Junkie, Yes, okay, I know, Pedestrian.
Wait, did you just
Guardian?
Say what? Hold up, what did you just say?
Junkie? Yeah, they're part of the Pedestrian network.
Yeah, but which is owned partly by Murdoch and partly by SBS, I think, if I remember correctly.
Yep, but things like Viceland, Crikey, bloody Anyway, we have these alternative media outlets, and we have a lot of voters who are if there's a double dissolution election, there's going to be an entire class of voters that have just been following politics along from the memes, but weren't over the age of 18 at the last election. New media changes things. There's an argument that there is a democratization of media, and certainly I'm not optimistic enough to believe that it's entirely the case, but it's got to count for something, right?
Yeah, okay, so I talk about this in my documentary. However, the short summary of the conclusion is that while these new media outlets are very good, these essentially, there are big media machines like, Nine, Fairfax, Murdoch's media machine, which includes Sky News, The Australian, all of that. And then there's the ABC, 7 and 10 are also media machines, but again, the 3 big ones in Australia that own 80% of media are Murdoch, ABC,
Fairfax, and
yeah. So here's while the while the small humanist media operations are doing good work, they do not have the volume of content, nor do they have the reach necessary to definitively tip things in a certain direction. They have an impact, and it's a good impact, but it's not enough. Does that make sense?
Yes and no, because all other things being equal, I would treat that there are still a lot of voters who don't engage with these services. A lot of voters who exclusively engage with these services, and most voters who are somewhere in the middle, in the same sort of a way that, broadly speaking, the Liberal Labour split Australia-wide. If you give Australians a choice of one or the other, it should theoretically be a fairly even split. This is why we sort of have two dominant parties. So I see that these very small forces can be magnified by where they are applied.
Yes, and that's where organizations like Get Up come into it. They tend to target either seats with extreme MPs or like Peter Dutton, or marginal seats. Where in one election they targeted 2019, they targeted Dutton's seat and they failed because, well, he's somehow well liked in his seat. However, it's basically attacking safe seats, kind of like the Teals. However, they weren't particularly effective there. So, in the 2022 election, they changed to marginal seats, and that helped Labour form government. But
so I know that when I was working at Gould's, there was a chap who would come in semi-frequently who was one of the organisers with Get Up. And I remember the first time I met him, my response was, yes, the social media arm of the Labour Party. So, Danny, if by chance you're watching this, I'd just like to apologise. I know that the High Court eventually found that you were substantially divorced from the Labour Party itself.
Yeah.
But also, I'm not wrong.
Well, look, I think you really are, but that's a conversation that we'll have to pick up in part 3 because we've once again run out of time.
Oh, Jesus.
And so
we still haven't approached like who is risking it. We still haven't figured out who is most risking it for the biscuit here.
Well, we kind of have, but we'll get more into it and give a definitive answer.
As far as I can tell, the only winners are the media machines who will sell advertising time, and the losers are going to be the Australian people either way. And there's no way to call this whatever the hell it's going to end up being at present. Like, do we even do polling in the months after an election to see how people feel about parties, or do we only bother when we think there's an election coming up because it's time for one?
There's regular polling, but then both. There's both. There's regular polling, and then there's polling close to election time. But that's all next episode. Thank you for watching, and we'll finally conclude this in part 3. See you tomorrow. Have a good
night.